Oh, welcome to another edition of Something to Talk About. I'm just sitting out here on the deck of my yacht and I'm looking for my co host. She's somewhere either on the beach or somewhere around, but Vaughn will probably check in with us shortly. But we've had an ongoing, funny conversation between us because, as I posted in my promo for the show this week, uh, while I said one of us was here and one of us was sipping cocktails on the beach in Mexico. Well, I guess you can guess who was here and who was there. And unfortunately, I think her mind is still there because she just texted me and said, "Well, go ahead and you can start the show, and I'll join you as soon as I get there." Well, excuse me. So anyway, I thought, well, when she gets on the show, and she'll probably be doing it from her patio and everything, I was going to make it look like I was sitting out on my yacht out on the in the harbor and enjoying myself. So we'll catch up with her. Just saw a little bit of a drop in there. Ty Foley is has joined in and is listening. Thank you again, Ty, one of our most loyal listeners and a very dear friend. He and I. Well, we don't go back a long way. We go back a few years and all. But I'm a collector of Ty Foley's art, and also I'm very much a collector of Ty Foley's knowledge of art. We became good friends through Park West Galleries, and he's a very avid collector and we'll continue that relationship as we go forward. But I hope everyone is doing well. You know, we're still. A week or two ago, Vaughn and I said, maybe we should start talking a little bit less about the effects of this pandemic because it looks like maybe it's starting to slow down. More of the restaurants were starting to open up and maybe we see the light at the end of the tunnel. But some of those things opened up, and there were a lot of public gatherings, and the result of that is that there are more and more cases of COVID being diagnosed, more people getting sick, and so some of the restrictions that were eased going back a couple of weeks, now those are being rescinded or cut back. Some of the restaurants are going from 75% occupancy being cut back to 50% or maybe even less. Some of them that had indoor and outdoor dining, they're limiting it to just the outdoor dining. The problem is there's no menu for what's going on. You have to be kind of proactive as to what's going on. Seeing what stores have what restrictions. Some are limiting the number of people that can go through the door. Some, like here in Home Depot, there is one way in and a different way out of the store. They're trying to make it more of a one-way journey through and limiting the number of people in the store at any one time. I applaud some of those companies like Costco. You cannot even walk in the front door of Costco if you're not wearing a mask. And I know that maybe some people are upset because they say, well, I don't really need to wear a mask. Well, if you don't need to wear a mask for your sake, then please consider wearing a mask for my sake and for other people around you. The biggest controversy also now that's on our table is what's going to happen a couple of months from now in the school systems. The government wants all the schools to be open like they were last year in September and to open their doors business as usual this September. Is that a safe approach? I'm not the one that makes those decisions, but personally, I'm not so sure that it is. But in many school districts, they're leaving it up to the school administrators and in some cases up to the parents, which means some of the students will go back to the school classrooms and others will continue to be doing their learning from home. This has a whole, set of issues in itself because some parents who definitely need to get out of the house and go back to work. And I'll say, no, I need to get my kid back into the school so that I have the freedom to live my life and go to work and do the things I have to do. Other people are saying, no, I don't know whether I want my child to go back, even though the schools are going to be going that extra mile to make sure that that everything is clean and safe for the kids. Part of it is going to be a decision as to how safe the parents feel about sending the kids, and if they're going to keep them at home. Now those kids need to continue to do their learning online. So lots of questions. We're still faced with lots of those questions. We're not really thrilled about having to deal with those questions, but I guess we will until we do find the solution. In the meantime, hope that everything is going well for each and every one of you that are watching and listening. I thank you for being here for something to talk about. And if there's something that you want to talk about, go ahead and say so. Just a pop in from Sherry Scamardo, who said she loves the background. Yeah, I do too. The wind is just blowing through my hair. I'm really enjoying being out here on the yacht today. Sherry Scamardo, beautiful lady who is in charge of the senior program at Collin College. And she has had her challenges through the springtime with kind of a shortened season, having to do our classes virtually. I did a class in the summertime. By the way, for those that are not familiar, that are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Collin College has a program called SAIL, and that stands for Seniors Active in Learning. And it's open to seniors. They can sign up and take up to about 7 classes, per semester, and all for a flat fee, and go to multiple campuses when the campuses are open, and take programs just to keep the brain salad going. And it's a wonderful program. You can go to Collin College online and learn a little bit more about the continuing education programs and the SAIL program that they have. And Sherry Scamardo is the head of that program, and she does great work for all of the seniors in our area. For those that live outside the DFW area, contact your local community colleges. Find out what they have to offer in regard to continuing education for adults. And if they also have programs that are targeted specifically to the senior population. So, these are great. Oh, look who just popped in. My goodness. It's the monkey butt himself, my illustrious producer, the owner of KVGI Radio, and a backwoods warrior, it says on his shirt.
Yeah, so, company no longer in business, but I like the shirt. I like the material. It's comfortable. And it's got the best thing on the arm,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And since you live in the backwoods now, you're a backwoods warrior.
Well, you can see back there, it's not snowing or anything, but it's kind of got that black and whitish look back there. But that's because the sun's not out and it's been raining off and on. I was getting a comment about Ty Foley, and I don't like the guy. I don't like comments back and forth. As an artist, I don't like him as an artist. Oh, wait a second. I don't know him as an artist. What I will say, what I do like about him is I heard that he's going to do an HBO special called Foley Roast. And he's going to be roasted. So there you go, Ty.
Yeah, Ty has made some guest appearances on KVGI Radio, and there's probably going to be another one scheduled down the road, especially when we get Doug King and Ty Foley and myself in the same room or on the same video. Mark has to sit there to make sure that the gain on the microphones doesn't go through the roof, and also that we don't crack the screens.
This is what I get from him. A compliment for him doing an HBO Supermax special, and he says, "Who are you again?" Well, I'm somebody. You're nobody. Yeah, I like to, see, Ty gets on and he thinks him and Doug have this relationship, and they like to argue and chant with each other, and it's like this perfect marriage made in hell, they say, right? But
Right.
I thought I would just come on for a minute while Vaughn was getting ready and chastise him for a second. I saw his comments and stuff, and I was just like, you gave him all the praise about being an artist, and I was like, he's a better comedian than he is an artist, but that's what I know.
Well, he and Doug both try every avenue available to try and dig into the show.
I'm already there. It looks like Vaughn came on.
She did. Oh my goodness. Oh,
sorry.
Hello.
Hi guys. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was literally stuck in traffic. Literally.
Oh yeah, right.
I had an early morning appointment, and I had it down to the hour and the minute, and then I got stuck at a light that they were doing work on, and we sat there for probably almost 10 minutes before we could get through that light. So I'm here though.
You're here and you're sitting out on your patio, and I decided that since you just spent the last week sunning and enjoying Mexico, that I would just join you on the show from my yacht today. I'm just anchored here off the shore.
Yeah, I see that.
And just wanted to do tit for tat for you.
Yeah, I like that backdrop. That's cool. And then it looks like Mark's got snow behind him. I don't know.
We were just talking about that. That is kind of strange, though.
Is it snow?
No, it's just like the sun's not out, and I've got really bright lights in here. Here, I'll tell you what. I'll turn the lights off. Let's see if it gets more colorful.
See if it turns green out there. No, now it went away completely.
Now it's a blizzard.
Now, yeah.
Now it's a whiteout.
That is funny, but it's funny. It's almost like everything indoors is in color, and outdoors it's all in black and white.
Yeah, that's so straight. It really does look like a pretty.
Well, I do have the trim that's behind me it's called carbonized, so it's a slate gray walls, and a very bright white. So it's odd, but I'm on my laptop camera. I don't have any of my stuff hardly set up here in my new studio, and so I'm using a laptop camera, and it's basic.
Well, it just looks funny. It looks like we've got snow, beach, or wait, I'm pointing the wrong direction.
Yeah. It's sunny and clear out here on the water, and it's snowing in Michigan.
Well, it was beautiful in Mexico. That's all I have to say.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Just rub it in. Rub it in.
It was very, very nice. The weather was perfect.
So that brings up my first question to you, Vaughn, is, over the last so many weeks, we've been talking about staying indoors and not going out into the public and social distancing and all. And then you just jet off to Mexico for a week with the family. What was the experience for you physically and mentally to leave the house, go to the airport, interact with all these people, then go into a foreign country for a week? And were you apprehensive at all?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this was Elizabeth's senior trip that had been planned for a long time. And there was a group of her friends going, 7 in total, 7 of her, friends. And then their parents, or at least one of their parents. So it was a group of us that had had this plan for a long time. And we really were just kind of sitting back and waiting to see if there were going to be any travel restrictions to and from Mexico, because that's where we had planned on going, Cabo. And we just kind of, for a while, just sat back and waited to see if this trip was even going to happen. And we thought that we would just, if in fact there was any reason to not go, if there were travel restrictions, or if Mexico was recommending that we not come in and whatever, that we would postpone the trip. But none of that ever happened, which I was a little bit surprised that it didn't. There were never any restrictions on travel. In fact, we kept hearing about more and more people going. In fact, and we have friends actually that have a house there. They've been there almost a month in Cabo. And they've had friends coming and going to their place over the past month or so parents included, and I mean, meaning older parents included, traveling to and from. So I guess we all just kind of thought, well, we've not been given a red light. The green light's still on, although it might be yellow light. Maybe it's more yellow light. And we went knowing that we would travel with the utmost, kind of responsibility and mindfulness, and follow the guidelines. And that's what we did. And yes, were we apprehensive? All of us were a little bit apprehensive. But we called the property several times where we were going to be staying. We talked to them about their guidelines and, how were they handling this? Like, what were they doing as a staff to make their guests feel comfortable and be safe? And so we talked to them almost every day before we even left for the trip. Of course, we all knew what the airlines were doing, how they were managing the travel, So yes, it was a trip that was interesting because it was a little nerve-wracking to get there. But once we were there on property, I'll be honest with you, we felt very comfortable, and we felt like this. Well, first of all, the property was only at about 300 guests, and they can usually accommodate around 1,200 to 1,400. And so we never, ever felt like we were elbow to elbow with strangers and in the midst of large groups. We really were kind of on our own private little trip because we were just with our group wherever we were on property at any given time. The staff could not have been more, in my eyes, responsible. They were everywhere you walked on property. Somebody was cleaning handrails, doorknobs, stepping aside, letting you pass. All the staff wore masks. Again, like I said, because they had the capacity restriction, they were not going to ever go above 50%. But while we were there, they were only at about 30%. So you can imagine a big sprawling property. You knew that there were other people there. Obviously, it was active and there was music playing and it was fun and all that. They created that kind of environment, but you never, ever felt like you were just really crowded and amongst strangers and in large groups. They had certain places closed on property, like the bars were not open, meaning like the swim-up bars, places that would generally attract groups of people to sit and congregate. They didn't have those places open. Instead, they had staff in the pool. Perhaps if since you couldn't go to the swim-up bar, they'd have staff come to you in the water. Would you like something? And they would get it for you. So they really kept the properties, they kind of kept things in the evenings. They might have 7 restaurants, but they might have only 3 open that night. They had the whole typical, like we have here, every other table, certain capacity in the restaurants. Again, all staff wearing masks and gloves if they were handling any kind of. It was almost more. They were almost more in tune to the restrictions and the guidelines at this particular property. I can't speak for all the properties in Mexico than they are at some of the places here, in terms of just how careful they appeared to be, doing, how careful they were kind of tending to the needs of their guests. Everything was individually packaged down to a pen. If you were to use a pen for some reason, sign something, it was in a little package. You had to open it. Hand sanitizer everywhere. If somebody came up and took something, they would wash immediately, give you. It was, while we were there, we felt about as comfortable as we could feel at, any public place. And again, it wasn't crowded. My concern was that it was going to be crowded, but it wasn't at all. So that was comfortable.
Do you think that maybe that, obviously from the guest standpoint, you know, with only 30% occupancy, you guys had the run of the land there.
Oh,
But
pretty much, yeah.
do you think that because of COVID and all that was maybe the reason why they weren't at 50 or 75% occupancy or more?
Well, I don't think they're going over 50%. I think I think they as a property,
that's
chain,
their restriction.
Yeah, I believe they put a cap on it. But also, I think it's a combination of just them putting a cap on it, and then also probably people who are choosing not to travel right now. And now, one day got a little bit over 30. It was actually 4th of July, and there was some turnover on that day, people coming in, so it was a little bit higher. But then the next day it went down again with people leaving. And so, I think that that was probably a combination of, and to answer your question, yeah, we did feel like we were, our presence was known there because we had 7 girls and they kind of traveled together around property. They'd sit by the pool or they'd sit, and, so, yeah, I mean, now, and that was our experience. And, they didn't have the buffets open, of course. At some of these all-inclusive places, they have buffets. No buffets were open for obvious reasons. Instead, you had to, sit down and dine in or dine out. And if you wanted to, it felt more comfortable dining outside, you had that option. I was going to tell you, I was sitting at the table and overhearing a conversation next to me, and she was talking about a property where they had just come from or knew somebody there, and they did have their buffets open, but they had wait staff escort them to the buffet. And I don't know exactly how they would do it, but then they would talk them through and walk them through the buffet and I guess serve them in a particular way and then go back to their table. So most of these tourist kind of big, properties are really appear to be going to great lengths to make people feel safe and comfortable at their property. The last thing they want, obviously, is something bad to go down at one of their properties, and then they have to, exactly, work through that. So, yes, once we got there, I mean, getting out the door on this end was a bit nerve-wracking. We were all a little bit uneasy and unsure. But the fact that there were never any travel restrictions going to and from Mexico kind of made us feel like, all right, I guess. And so, and I knew that it was going to be, that the property was going to be, following the guidelines and the restrictions, but they went above and beyond what I even expected. I mean, the fact that everything was individually packaged, or the staff, just the way they were cleaning everywhere, and the way they kept people kind of away and distant, and the way they distanced themselves, and the way they were washing their hands and they actually exceeded my expectations. This particular property did.
Do you feel that it was the same way through the whole experience? In other words, when he got to DFW, obviously there probably weren't a lot of people running around the airport at DFW, but then when you got on the plane, did you have that same feeling of comfort that they were cleaning, they were taking care of it? Were you social distance on the plane, or was the plane packed? And then when you arrived at the Mexican airport, did you also feel like they were stepping out of the box in order to keep things safe?
So that's a good question. And actually, I actually talked about this to a friend of mine. The part of the travel experience for me that was a little bit kind of just a little eerie, I don't know if that's the word, but was actually the flight. Going through DFW at that hour, it typically would have been more crowded for sure. We noticed that it wasn't as, obviously not nearly as crowded as it would have been summertime travel, but it was active. It was active. Now, there were very few restaurants open when we were at DFW the morning that we departed. And so
what time did you leave?
Well, our flight was at 7 7:30. No, it wasn't. It was at 9:30. 9:30. 9:30.
Okay.
So we were there in the 8s. Yeah.
So the shops and restaurants were just opening. Those
Yeah,
were
but
open.
normally at 9:30 you've got more open, and because people are traveling at all hours, so
Right.
it doesn't matter if it's 9:30. Somebody could have just flown in from somewhere where they want dinner or lunch or whatever. So normally it's much more open and active. So the closures I felt when I got to DFW that morning, I felt the silence of the retail and restaurants at DFW. But there was enough activity at almost every gate. There were groups of people traveling somewhere. Being on the plane was a little bit odd for me because the flight attendants don't interact with you at all. You get on the plane, they hand you a bag of a treat and a bottle of water, and that's it. You go and you sit down. And they're not going up and down the aisle asking if you need anything, or they don't serve food or drink or beverage or anything. So they're limiting the interaction. And of course, everyone's wearing a mask on the plane, which is a little daunting to look back at a plane full of people, with masks on. It's just
like a whole bunch of doctors going into surgery.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the flight attendants. So that was a little bit odd for me because
was it a full flight?
I mean, our flight was pretty full, with the exception of a few rows. Elizabeth had gone to Cabo a few weeks, or maybe a month ago now. Her flight only had about 15 people on it to and from. So I think it just depends on maybe the flight, the time of day you're going, and where you're going and whatnot. But our flight was pretty full, with the exception of a few rows here and there. But we sat together as our family and didn't sit by anybody else. Everybody had their masks on. Again, very little interaction. The flight attendants came up and down just to take trash. But other than that, they didn't interact. They would come over the intercom occasionally and check in. And, but there's not, I mean, everybody just sits down. And when you get on the plane, it smells, all I can say is it smells like a swimming pool. So it smells very clean. It must be some spray or something that they do.
Smells like hand sanitizer.
It really does. And then of course everybody's wiping their area. We wipe our area with Clorox, and then our hands. And I mean, we couldn't have. We traveled, but it seemed to me that most people traveling around me were traveling with great respect and responsibility to themselves and to others around them. People would step away. You were not crowded in a line. Obviously, you had to get on the plane, so you're in a line there. But people kind of kept their distance, and everybody had their masks on. And like I said, you got on the plane, and you could see people wiping down and hand sanitizing and put the air on. So, and then in Mexico, actually, on that end, they didn't even have you come. You walked, you parked the plane. What did you park a plane? I don't know. You landed the plane and then you parked. Do you park it? I don't know. We parked the plane.
Yeah. What do? Do you park a plane?
You park a plane, Mark. Do you park a plane?
Okay. You park a plane and then you deboard.
Okay, so we parked the plane and then we deboarded, and then we actually walked from the little runway, not the runway, but like they came on, and then we
the gangway.
I guess so, yeah. And then we walked to the door, and again, I'm assuming that's to keep us from clustering in the jetway. I don't know, but we were out and opened the door as soon as possible. And then, of course, in Mexico, they took your temperature right when you got there, and they took your temperature before you left as well. You also had to fill out a health form, answering all kinds of questions. Where have you been over the past 14 days or whatever? And they're all like, the people who were taking your temperature were dressed like in medical gear. So one of my fears traveling was that I got there and I had a fever. And then what do you do with me? Put me on a plane and send me back? I don't know.
I was going to say, did you see any instances of anybody getting off of the plane and getting their temperature and then being diverted over to TSA or something?
No.
So for the most part, we were talking earlier about the comfort level of going places where you are wearing a mask, but there are other people that, are exercising their their right to not wear the mask. Did you encounter any areas where people were not wearing masks, or pretty much everybody was following the rules?
I'm going to tell you a funny story, and I really don't know if this man just borrowed this T-shirt or what. I don't know. But we were in the airport coming back home, and everybody has a mask on. I mean, everyone has a mask on. And even when you get into the airport, I went into a gift shop to get a bottle of water and a little bag of chips for the flight home. And before I even entered that gift shop, she stood there with her little tray of stuff, and she squirted my hands. I had to wash my hands, and she took my temperature.
Really?
Before I could even go into the gift shop. And they stood there, and they only let a certain number of people in. And when they left through a different way, then they would let somebody else in. So again, the travel experience exceeded my expectations in terms of people around me showing that they were being mindful and responsible and respectful of the whole travel experience. That was my observation. But there was one man in the airport on that end who was sitting. Oh, and you had to sit. They had certain there. By the way, there are stickers everywhere. I feel like I'm in a big giant game of Twister. I mean, there are just stickers everywhere. Stand here, social here, be here, go here, respect people. And like, you feel like you're just jumping from one circle to another because you're just trying to make sure you're not too close to people. But even on the chairs and the seats in the airport, there are big stickers, saying, and professionally made stickers. You just skip this seat or don't sit here, and then an open one, and then the sticker again, all over. So nobody was sitting, unless you're family, you can sit next to each other. But this one man sitting in one of the seats, his whole family had a mask on. He had a couple daughters and his wife, and then he was not wearing a mask. And he was this big, burly, beefy guy who had FBI and some other smaller words below it on his big gray T-shirt. And I was like thinking, okay, is he really FBI? If he is, why is he not wearing a mask? Or did he just, just like acquire that T-shirt from someone somewhere down the road? I don't know. But he was one person who I saw that day not wearing a mask. And maybe he just had it off for a few minutes while he, ate. I don't know. But other than that, everybody I saw had a mask on. And followed those. We wore our mask all the way until we walked into the airport on that end, until we walked out of the airport at DFW. And it was fine. I thought it was going to be a little bit more uncomfortable, but I wear a lighter mask, and so that helps. I know that there are those masks that have the filters in them, which tend to be a little heavier and thicker. I didn't wear one like that. So maybe if you wear one like that, you might feel a little more claustrophobic. And our flight was only a couple hours. And so it wasn't like we were, on a flight for 5 hours. So the experience overall was better than I thought it was going to be. Yes, it was nerve-wracking to make the decision, and should we go? And then we just kind of kept watching. And then Abbott came out with his new ruling and all that or whatever. And still there were no restrictions. And I know people who just left yesterday from Mexico. So I guess Mexico right now is because we had an appointment today, and they asked about traveling outside the country. And I said we'd been to Mexico, and they said that's not one that's not a red zone. I don't know, whatever they said. That's not, because I was honest. I said I'd been to Mexico, and they were like, well, they said something like, that's not one that we're restricting against or whatever. I don't know. So
yeah, I'm curious about the fact that you were going to a resort, an all-inclusive resort area. In other words, it was almost like a city within a city. You weren't just out wandering the streets of Mexico.
Oh gosh, no. That is a point I need to make quite clear. Absolutely. We don't leave property. By the way, under normal circumstances, when we travel to Mexico, we stay on property because you don't really have to go anywhere. They've got restaurants and shopping and bars and fun things for the kids, whatever. And big beaches and pools, and not just one pool, but 5 pools. And so it is like a city within a city, especially during these times. our plan was to get to property. We took a private van. We didn't get on big public transportation. So we were just with our people traveling from the airport to the property. And we stayed on property the whole time. We did not get on a bus, go into town, do shopping, we stayed on property. So that's a very good question. And I would like to think that most people would probably, especially right now, if they're going there, should do the same thing. You just don't know where cabs have been, and you just don't know. It just increases your risk a little bit more. So yeah, we stayed on property. This was a Hard Rock actually property, and I commend their efforts.
So were there when you got there, were there some restrictions on property? You mentioned it with Hard Rock. The first thing that comes to mind is live entertainment. Was that curtailed at all, or adjusted, if you will? Were there some activities that they normally would have that they had closed down because of safety issues?
It didn't appear so. Well, excuse me, they did, but they didn't really close. So they had. One time I saw an indoor kind of a show, and it was a band with a couple singers and dancers, and they were on stage, and it was kind of weird, Stuart, because they're up there with guitars and they're singing and they're kind of moving around and entertaining, wearing masks.
Oh, so really?
I can't even imagine being up there under the, and then the people who were watching the show, the audience, they had set up pre-designated places where you could sit, which were all
separated, yeah.
And then the other entertainment was mostly done outdoors, again, wearing masks, all the performers, entertainers, and they were wearing masks and they were performing outdoors in an open area. And people were standing around watching, but most everybody that was sitting around or standing around or walking around were with their groups and spaced out as pretty well. And if we were inside, because again, remember, the property wasn't very full. So it was right. It was easy to do that. At one point, Phil and I were sitting by the pool, and we were talking about the fact that, we knew that we were only about 300 people on this property. We were trying to envision it at 1,200 to 1,400. It would have been packed. And I think had it been like that, I would have felt very uncomfortable. But because I felt like, I'm sure that they would have liked to have been at 50%. Because they've lost a lot of money during these months.
More income, sure.
But they were, when we asked, they said we're only at about 30 right now. But they said that it has really picked up, and more people are maybe just feeling comfortable traveling, or maybe it's just the time of year. I don't know. But I just don't know how long they'll be able to sustain, obviously, the business, because, every day is a different day with new numbers and all that. So, but it was very nice that some of these employees were able to get back to work, and you could see how genuinely appreciative they were just to be back working again, and a bit of normalcy, I think, back to their lives or whatever, and money in their pockets. So yeah, it was, and then we traveled back home on Wednesday. I told you we got home late Wednesday night, and we were pretty tired. But and we'll lay low now. We'll lay low. I'm not.
Well, the next decisions you have.
I'm going to do.
The next decisions you have to start working on now is, while you were gone, there were lots of decisions being made regarding the schools opening up on time. Were they going to open up completely? Were they going to give the cities, the government would like all schools open, just as usual. A lot of the school systems are trying to decide, giving the parents the choice whether they want to send the kids to school or keep them virtually online. You've got two going back to college now, and they're going to be going down to Waco. Have you gotten any information from Baylor as to whether the campus is going to be fully opened or what kind of restrictions are going to be on campus?
I mean, I feel like our president has been so very communicative, which has been very appreciated. But it seems like every week it's something new and different in terms of the developments and the plan moving forward. But right now, Baylor, yes, is opening for fall. Obviously, all the kids are going back. I've heard that kids, I don't quote me on this, but maybe kids from certain countries, there might be some restrictions there. But for the general student population, they're going back as normal. Well, as normal. They're gonna,
whatever that is.
whatever that's going to be. I know that there'll be some modifications made to kind of like the dorm life living. Specifically, I don't know what, but I know that there'll be some modifications there in terms of just trying to keep them as safe and healthy as possible. In terms of classes, Elizabeth got her schedule, as did Emily. Although Emily's a senior, so her schedule is a little bit different. But Elizabeth being a freshman, they have created a schedule where they're just trying to spread out the kids as much as they can. So, for example, Elizabeth's schedule, she's got 15 hours. Some of her classes will be online only. And really, I think she only has one online only class, which happens to be chapel. At Baylor, you have to take a chapel and a religion. So I believe that's her only one online class. Her other classes will be combined hybrid or classroom. And the classroom experience is obviously the traditional classroom where you go and you go into your classroom and you are instructed by your instructor, your professor. Yeah. The hybrid is where, say you have 20 kids in a class, 10 of them will take that class online. Say it's a Wednesday class on Wednesday, and the other half will go into the classroom, and then the following Wednesday they'll switch. And the group that was in the classroom will now be online for that lesson, and the class that had been online will now be in the classroom for that lesson. So that's what they're calling a hybrid class. So Elizabeth's got a combination of hybrid classes, classroom, probably just based on the number. They can do that. If there are only 10 kids signed up for a certain class, they can do the in-classroom experience. And then the online only, which right now she only has one. Yeah. Also, Baylor is looking to hire more educators, open up more class, like more of a particular class. And so just trying to really spread out the student population as much as they can. And I'm sure that as we move forward, that plan will be massaged along the way and according to the new state guidelines and what's going on with the virus and all of that. But Baylor is definitely being very good about keeping us informed every step of the way. There's been talk even now, and I, again, do not quote me, but of football being in the spring rather than in fall, which would be interesting. But yeah. And so, but I can't speak to those details at all.
They'll compete with the baseball season.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So, yeah. So, and
you haven't been back long enough to find out what's going on at the elementary school level because you do student teaching and all, and find out what some of those guidelines and restrictions are going to be. Once you get back into the local school system too. But there's a lot of talk there again about whose choice is it going to be as to where the kids are going to go.
Yeah.
And
I've heard that there are some parents that are just not ready to send their kids back, whatever age they might be, whatever grade they might be in, but that they might consider homeschooling, which I don't know that everybody is qualified to homeschool or even equipped to homeschool or has the time to homeschool.
Well, and how much a part of that homeschooling are the schools going to take on in order to provide that information for the students to be homeschooled?
Right.
And the hard part is we're already in the middle of July, and a lot of the schools are getting ready to open in the middle of August. We're 4 weeks away, and they're still trying to juggle exactly what we're going to do, and watching the number of new cases on a daily basis to see what decisions have to be made.
Right.
It's got to be a tough decision to put all of our school administrators in right now.
I'm sure that they are all like just knee to knee in these meetings, just trying to hash out some kind of plan that makes the majority of parents and students going back to school. And I'm talking just like 12th grade and under, just public school here, make them feel safe and comfortable. And they might find themselves needing to hire more teachers as well to open up additional classrooms to lower the student teacher kind of ratio. And because I know that, yes, I do substitute teach, and some of the classrooms can be 26, 27 kids. And that's just too many right now. So they're going to need to maybe come up with some kind of plan where, and I know budgetary, constraints will keep them from hiring, many new teachers or whatever. But
right.
I would think that would have to be a main focus, is to really just try to keep these kids in small groups.
Well, if the option is for some of the parents is that it is up to them as to whether they want their children to be in person in the schools or at home. If let's say, the scenario you gave earlier, that there's 26 students in the classroom, that if half of them are in the classroom, that'll make it easier for the in-class experience, and the others that are going to be doing it virtually, that at least gives a little bit of breathing room for the teachers that are physically in the school with the students. But again, they're not going to know until day one as to how many of the students are going to be in the classroom and how many of them are still going to be at home.
Well, I think they're going to need to get that information as soon as possible.
They got to do it quickly
during registration or whatever. But also cafeterias would be a concern. And maybe these kids don't eat in the cafeteria for for an indefinite period of time.
Yeah,
maybe
I think they were talking about that too, that all lunches will be brown bag lunches from home.
For the time being, yes, I could see that, because then you're not putting 100 some odd kids in a cafeteria at the same time going through the line. And
right.
So now, then you're up against the kids who are on a meal plan and who rely on those school lunches. Yeah. So there's so much of this that needs to, and again, like I said, I can speak only to Frisco ISD. I firmly believe that right now they're trying to put together a plan that's going to make our district, the shareholders of our district, feel very safe and comfortable moving forward. Right. And if a family so chooses to homeschool, I think that's fine. Just, just make sure that you're in a position to be able to give your child still a good,
the best education possible.
Yeah.
Well, what we'll do is we'll spend the next week kind of looking at what's happening, and we'll meet here again next Friday and go over that, and then pick some other things to talk about too. But in the meantime, glad you're back in the old USA, and
good to be back.
I'm gonna
have fun on your sailboat. Yeah,
I'm gonna sit back and order. I'll take another one, please. Yes,
right.
And then we'll head back into the harbor. And for those that have tuned in, thanks for being with us, and we'll catch you right here again next week at the same time. Go out, make it a good day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and wear your masks. Okay, take care. Talk to you later, Vaughn.
That's right.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye.